hand. And now the floor goes to a great friend of ours, someone who's also a friend of Tullio De Mauro. Without Tullio De Mauro, we would have never met. He's the one who introduced us, and I would like this person to introduce herself by herself. She's fantastic. Thank you. Annamaria Testa. Good morning. Good morning to everyone. I deal with communication and creativity. I taught this to older students. This is the format, and we would like to bring this back to its real life size. This is it. Creativity, critical thought and thinking, also in the web. Now, waiting for the presentation to start. Full screen, please. There we go. No. Now, I've been involved in communication and creativity for many years now. I also wrote a book, and this is from the viewpoint of a teacher trying to explain the paradigms of creativity and creativeness and the different spheres of application of creative thought. And let me say immediately that creativity is not an activity. There is no right moment for creativity. And creativity is an attitude, it's a mental habit. And whatever the event, whatever the activity or challenge, creativity is not stiff nor procedural, but rather very much open, looking for new solutions, very curious, in order to understand what are the opportunities that come along with a new situation. So I was asked to talk about creativity and critical thinking on the network, on the web. That means that we have to bring in a world which is not the physical world, a series of attitudes and of exploratory willingness that is also to exist in the physical world, that should exist in the physical world. So creativity is a tailored or geared process, something which is very aware, something geared to something in particular, meaning that it's made up of attention, focusing, meaning that I'm looking for effective ways to achieve an objective, to reach an objective, not to express myself and just doing whatever. It's made up of rigor and endeavors. Sometimes you go on and you achieve the result by errors and attempts. Yeah, as I said, it's made of rigor. You should never be happy of what you obtain. It's made up of curiosity and openness. Now, I want to underline that objective doesn't mean expressing yourself. It's not self-expression, in other words. The objective means that you are proudly obtaining the result that you had in mind and that you wanted to obtain and that can be shared. Creativity never is a solipsistic thing and exists. It can be applied in all disciplines: literature, cuisine, cooking mastery. I can apply this to whatever field. You can have fun. So creativity means that you obtain good results, useful results that can be shared, and the same applies to the web. Now, what happens when they are on the web? Sometimes you are on the web and you see that 91% of the teenagers aged between 15 and 24 are surfing. 94.5% of the students surf. 80% of the 14 to 19 people exceed and access the web through the mobile phones, and there is 15.3% of people and students between 11 and 14 that never accessed the web. That means that they will be cut off whenever being adults. So we have to teach them to recover that web, because otherwise they're going to be expelled because of web illiteracy. The 15 to the 24-year-olders are the ones that make the best use of online contents, video, music, TV, online newspapers are being excluded. 80% of them use social networks. And on the Sole 24 Ore of today, there is an article saying that we make great use of social networks, of Facebook and the rest. But the network is not made only of Facebook. It's not just Facebook. It's a much bigger universe. And 70% of households have internet access. 40% of childs aged between 6 and 10 are already capable of accessing the web, can go online. So this is statistical data from the year 2016. Now, what does it mean, accessing the web, knowing what you want to do and what you are going to do? Meaning, it means that you know what to look for, being capable of selecting and making distinctions, and knowing how to interact, meaning that you make use of skills. Now, knowing what to look for means that you have to know what the web is, which is not clear to everyone and to all of our young teenagers. So I made a list of this, and I know that even organizing a discourse in a given way is something that pertains to creativity and is capable of adding a meaning to a discourse. So when you line up words, you can add a meaning, you can give a new meaning. And PISA test tells us that whenever the students use the internet for the school, and this is the PISA test for digital reading, and it tells us that they do not perform any better than those who do not use it. That means that the way to use the internet and the web at school is not helping them planning a research or surfing through the web. Now, the PISA test seems to suggest that students are getting poor help from schools in developing these skills that are becoming ever more important. Now, maybe this is the ideal, instead, the ideal environment to develop any such skills. So the first thing that you should know whenever being confronted with a class of students, even if very young, is to explain to them that when on the web you need an internet link and connection, a browser, that is helping us surfing the web and through the web and reading information. Google Chrome, Safari, Firefox, there are a number of browsers. Each one of them accesses the network and the web in slightly different ways. And it would be interesting to make a comparison of the different browsers. An internet connection and the browser help us to access the web from wherever, whatever corner in the world we are. So we need an engine, a research engine in the first place, which means that there should be a system that, when queried in a specific way, points out and points at a number of things or places where to go. And this is a mechanism that it's absolutely not clear in the minds of our students. There are people that think that the web is Facebook and that Google is a strange place where there is someone behind the screen that answers your questions. Now, the very first thing that I would do in my classroom is asking to find metaphors, the metaphors of the system. So if the web or if the internet were to be the Far West, the environment would be, or the browser would be, the horse leading me to wherever I want to go, and the search engine is the Indian guide telling me where the gold mines are and where the trails are. And if the internet were to be the in-between land, what would be what if the internet were to be the galaxy, and what would be what, or who would be who? Now, what is in the first place the engine, the research engine? The research engine understands the keywords, and so you do not query it in a natural way. So you have to eliminate useless words, add specific words. And a search or a query is not just a single query, it's a series of queries, and you have to change sometimes the keywords and modify them. And this is a creative work. And this is how to formulate the question that you pose to the research engine. So this means that you work on synonyms. Means that if you're despaired, you know what to look for, and that if you spend 10 minutes on the Wikipedia page, then you have to know what Wikipedia is, what it means. It means pinching keywords that could be experimented on different engines, research engines, helping two more, or benefiting from two more helps that are largely unknown. Whenever we key in a single word on the Google engine, we get some suggestions such as this. Very useful ones that make it possible to fine-tune and streamline the research. It's useful to see some other suggestions relating to specific pages, but unfortunately sometimes our boys and girls are not even aware of them because they don't see them. Then there are quotation marks. So quotation marks tend to help us find a specific quotation. For example, the dice is hurled or launched is what helped me find the historical meaning of that. But if I forget to say dice, what I could put is in between quotation mark the sentence, then put an asterisk instead of the word dice, and internet will complete the sentence, finding the right quotation. I could even use the minus sign, meaning that if I want to find a series of websites where dices are mentioned, not the kitchen cubes though, but dices. So I say dice minus sign plus kitchen, minus kitchen, and then other tools to filter the info according to the language, the country, and the data. So this is very useful, but very few of us tend to use this kind of filter, which is helping us finding news and information time after time and placing them in the very moment when they were placed on the web. Then the internet is a system where not everything is coexisting and co-present at the same time, which is what renders back the temporality to the network. It is useful and interesting to make image research through the Google Images research. There is an interesting function whereby you look for similar images, and if you look for Google Images, you see a tiny camera, and if you click on that camera, you upload a picture, and then you find all of the similar pictures similar to that picture. So there is this trick, but many more, 1,000 more tricks that are possible if you make use of the Google engine research engine. An interesting thing that can be done even with younger kids is asking them to make a research without tricks and then with the tricks, which makes them understand and absorb methods to look for something. Then the second point I'd like to talk is probably even more important. Here are the results of a Stanford school research in November 2016, and what emerged was that the secondary students are unable to distinguish the news from the sponsored content, even if it says sponsored content. They can identify advertising only if they see the logo of a company or a price. If there is no price attached, they believe that that is an objective piece of news. They think that the first result found with Google is the most authoritative and reliable, as if Google were to be the great wise research engine and not a series of algorithms. So they let images capture them, and they don't even control whether the source is reliable, if it's photoshopped, and whether the footnotes correspond to the picture that they are looking at. So what should we tell our boys and girls? What should we do in order to make them understand? Well, we should make them understand that there are reliable websites and unreliable ones. And if the internet is the Far West, then there are safe trails and other trails that are much better not to trod, because you may find snakes, you may find wicked people. So we talk about specialized websites, known websites. We should get information as to what kind of website we ended up or landed through that search engine in order to try and understand the reliability, if there is a reliability of sources. Then how can we know whether the website is authoritative or not? So pay attention to commercial websites that are not always declared, careful to sponsored websites, or careful to the click-catching links that sometimes contain big lemons, and careful to material graphics, articles that are not signed, or websites that do not allow us to find who we are, what we do, and what are the credentials. And there are fantastic websites that make checks as to frauds. It's fun to find the story of a fraud on the internet, and there is it's important to make cross research, finding same pieces of news on other websites, and let's try and understand whether the links are reliable, active, still working or not. And finding a piece of news on the net should not make you think that this is creative, but it is creative, just like finding a treasury, and by mapping the links and by mapping the blind alleys they've ended up, and by mapping the results they got, then you know where you are, and if they were to confirm and confront the results, then they would understand much more about research carried out on the web. So the first concept is the one of a hoax. The hoax is an invented piece of news, very often very dangerous. Or the eco room. It's a closed group which is waterproof to external information, that keeps telling and narrating same things without ever checking them. Now, this is something that you have to tell them and inform them and warn them of. So the eco room is similar to the filter bubble, and the filter bubble has its own algorithms. So doing research is a creative dance with algorithms and with research engines. So you have to do out of and do without of all this. Now, in order to turn all of these elements into concrete actions, I think that the good tool could be represented by the storytelling in a classroom. Then there are those who hoax most, such as the fox and the cat in fairy tales. So let's make them understand what are the spoof stories and those who pretend them to be true. And for example, they should try and invent a way to find out a way out from a filter bubble. There are many books that could be looked at in order to find a way out from the filter bubble. There are many dystopic novels that are built around or designed around a field where information is filtered and top-down controlled. Now, you can do a lot of work, classwork on all this. The third thing is that you have to know how to interact. And when I asked a few years in a class of 40 people what was lack of information, 5 or 6 of them raised their hands and gave an answer. And the third year of the Bocconi University class was getting information through the Facebook social. And I said, oh my God, to myself. I said, oh my God, because that's not a reliable source. Currently in the world, and not just in Italy, students use Facebook as the first source of information. And sometimes they access it from the mobile phone, and it's definitely a very shallow reading of the reality. Facebook has bypassed television information in the minds of many youngsters. But I believe that this is happening because our youngsters don't know how to access and find pieces of news, and so they just are happy of what Facebook gives them. It's very important for them to know what to do to surf the web and find their own golden mines, their own rivers and mountain cliffs. And then there's another important thing about the social networks, because the social networks are interaction areas and places. This is something coming from a recent research made by the Tognolo Institute, asking to slightly older people what the social network is to them. But the proportions say the same. One is something that you do in order to show off, a way to tell something about yourself, to recount yourself, or a way where to put your CV, the diary where you narrate your own life. And only for some 27.6% of our youngsters, the social network is a way to be together, to come together, which is worrying, because it means that at least 60% of the reasons for which you are on a social network belongs to narcissistic ways of being together with others. So they are called social, but it means me, it's I, it's not we, it's not us. So that means that you have to do some work, and some 6% of our youngsters are the victims of bullyism, and this is something that comes from ISTAT work and ISTAT research that was published on the Repubblica recently, the Repubblica newspapers. But the great majority of our adults is bothered by violence, hate talk online. Sometimes, very often, they are subject to it, they give up and they accept it, and they think that this is a highly visible phenomenon, and it's accounting for some 10% of those who are online. The great majority is made of people that are on the surfing on the web, but in a different way. So it's important to tell them what's virtual, what's real, and it can prove interesting to them. It's a useful tool to them to use the Non-Hostile Communication Manifesto, which was released last week in Trieste and which has been launched on the web, and which comes with a decalogue, 10 items of good behaviors when surfing the web. So if you write the Manifesto della Comunicazione Non Ostile, you find it immediately. I swear that you download it.
Lo scaricate anche in buone dimensioni.
And one of the extraordinary functions of Google Images is telling us and helping us find the big and large and small sized images, depending on the pixels. You can even create a manifesto for your classroom. This one is not for the classroom instead. You cannot post it in a classroom. I'll conclude by saying something that could prove useful. For some years, I organized a website on where you can find more than 600 articles talking about creativity, language, and writing. And as to the method issues that you find in the menu, you can find some 800 articles as to how to produce creative work, how to write, how to talk in public, how to structure a presentation. So everything is for free and useful that you can find. Now, when scrolling down with the home page, you can find a sort of a synopsis of the published articles. You can find them in the Target Loud, and you can also use the research or search function, or you could resort to going to the home page and you could find the sections in the menu. I apologize for this vision, which is deformed, and I hope I could pass on to you some contents. Many thanks for your kind listening.